Alright, the top 3 stories today are Francis Ngannou's announcement of a deal with the PFL, which includes him as a chairman of PFL Africa. UFC291's announcement of honestly one of the most stacked cards I've seen in recent memory, headlined by a rematch between Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier for the BMF belt. And the fight between Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley is finally announced. So stick around to find out more details on that. Let's get into it. Former UFC heavyweight Francis Ngannou has officially ended his free agency and announced that he will be signing with the PFL. After 4 long and highly publicized months of uncertainty and rumors, the former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou has finally made an announcement regarding his plans for his future in the sport of MMA. The announcement came this week as both Francis and PFL shared posts and statements on social media. The Predator is apparently set to fight in the company's Superfight division, a newly created division that will apparently allow the fighters involved to receive a greater share of the pay-per-view earnings. Along with the announcement of fighting in the PFL, Francis will also serve on the company's advisory board to represent fighter interests and serve as the chairman of PFL Africa, seemingly ticking all the boxes that the UFC refused to 4 months ago. Speaking recently on the announcement, Ngannou said, "Let's just say, all in, my deal with PFL is more than anyone else offered. The past few months have been a very interesting time to understand and see the landscape, but I'm very excited about this deal with the PFL because they basically showed what I was expecting. They didn't just show up as a promotion that was looking for a fighter, but really came as a partner that sees more value in you as a person." Whilst this new deal means Francis is set to fight in MMA, apparently his first actual MMA fight within the organization won't be held until 2024, with the Predator looking to round off 2023 with a boxing match first. It seems that Francis has finally found a place that respects his wishes to fight across different disciplines and act as a role model both within the sport of MMA and for fans and pundits. With the new announcement came a little back and forth between current UFC heavyweight champion Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. Francis reportedly called himself the baddest man on the planet in some of the promos surrounding his signing with the PFL, to which Jones responded on Twitter, "Calling yourself the baddest man on the planet from across the street? Who does that, lol?" To which Francis soon responded ominously, "Then cross the street."
And no matter what other promoters say, no matter what some fighters say, no matter what media say, who do you think is the baddest motherfucker on the planet? Me.
Whilst people will now argue until they're blue in the face about who is scared of who and who would have destroyed who if they were in the same organization, an interesting point that Francis Ngannou's coach Eric Nixick recently made will likely raise eyebrows about how Francis and his team viewed the matchup between the Predator and Bones Jones. Apparently, Nixick recently claimed that part of the failed negotiations with the UFC for Francis included the fact that should Francis end up losing to Jones, it would have resulted in a steep pay cut for Ngannou. Now, whilst context is clearly needed to clarify this statement further, and you could write it off as simple comments about the business aspects of an athlete's career, it certainly isn't the "I'll fight anyone" mentality that we are so used to seeing bandied around the sport by a lot of its biggest athletes. What do you think about the announcement of Francis moving to the PFL? Do you think it was the right move as opposed to an organization like ONE or going strictly to boxing? Let me know in the comments. One of the most dizzying, insanely stacked UFC cards has just been announced by Dana White recently. And call me a conspiracy theorist, but it aligned a little too conveniently with the PFL's announcement that they have signed Francis Ngannou. White recently went on ESPN to again shout news of a fight card announcement for UFC 291, and in this instance, I will forgive his shouting because this card is huge. It is stacked from top to bottom and features a vacant BMF belt fight between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. Whilst the BMF belt was a novelty, was frankly never truly defended and is a little cringe these days, the fight nonetheless should produce fireworks as these top lightweights go head to head again. Since their first fight, Poirier is 6-2, including his 2 wins over McGregor and an interim title victory over Max Holloway. Gaethje is also 6-2 since their first meeting, with both fighters only losing in championship matchups. The co-main event will feature the light heavyweight debut of Alex Bahia, who will be facing off against former champion Jan Blachowicz, and the rest of the card features Paulo Costa against Ikram Aliskerov, Tony Ferguson against Bobby Green, and Michael Chiesa against Kevin Holland. Evidence that this card is huge is the fact that Derek Lewis and Stephen Thompson are both respectively fighting on the prelims. This is a gigantic card so far, and hopefully it holds together over the coming months. Who are you most excited to see on the card? Sugar Sean O'Malley has finally got his wish for a shot at the bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling, as the UFC recently announced the pair will fight on August 19 at UFC292. The pay-per-view will be at the TD Garden, the first time the UFC has been back to Boston since 2019. O'Malley and Sterling recently faced off in the cage after Sterling retained his title against Henry Cejudo, so it was clear that this fight was next for both fighters. This will be a quick turnaround for Sterling, with the Cejudo fight taking place on May 6. The event will be co-mained by Zhang Weili as she looks to defend her title against Amanda Lemos in the co-main event. Who do you see coming out victorious between Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley? Let me know in the comments. That's all the MMA water cooler talk for today. Thanks again for watching Undisputed MMA. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, as it really helps me grow the channel and produce more content. Be sure to also hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the latest in MMA and the UFC.